She tripped her fucking face off. Don't get me wrong. You know what else she did? She never used heroin again.
Dang.
Yeah.
An interview with W.A. Simmons, author of California Sober, The Science of Recovery.
I wanted to talk to you because I saw your book on Reddit.
Okay.
And I came across it and I was like, oh fuck yeah, finally someone is defining what this means. So your book's called California Sober.
Yes. California Sober, The Science of Recovery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can rewire the brain in a way through taking psychedelics that changes your mind about drugs in a way that you don't want to do them anymore. You didn't want to do them. You have to go into it not wanting to do them. It's an intent thing.
Yeah.
But once you're there, it makes the transition seamless. And so you can rewire your brain to not want to do them. It disrupts what's called the default mode behavior in your brain, right? And so like when you're just not thinking about it and you just reach for a beer because that's what you always do, that's default mode behavior. When you grab a cigarette and you're not thinking and you light it, that's default mode behavior. Any drug, any addiction at all is mostly default mode behavior. And so when you disrupt that and then you reinforce your want, your desire to not use anymore, it rewires your brain. And it's pretty much that simple.
Yeah, it gets you out of like the rut of thinking like
The habit, the circle
what I do.
that every addict faces, it's a circle. And they're like, I don't want to get high. I don't want to get high. You know what? I'd love to get high today. I don't want to get high. I don't want to get high. I'd love to get high today.
Yeah.
And you only think about the consequences after the fact. And that's where the guilt comes in and you want to quit. By disrupting the default mode behavior and going into the intent of quitting, what you do is now when you wake up in the morning, that I want to get high is interrupted by, no, I don't. Why the hell do I want to do that?
Yeah.
You know?
Like
it's just going to lead to that again, you know?
Well, 1 sec. Wait, so tell me again, like I read your book, but anyone listening to this might not have read your book yet. So what was your story? You were telling me you started doing drugs when you were real young, right?
Oh my God, it was ridiculous. So I started doing drugs. Well, I started drinking. Shit, I was 5 years old when I had my first beer. But that was kind of, call it an accident. My mother was an alcoholic. My father was an alcoholic. And we were at a barbecue. And I used to always say, hey, Mom, can I get a sip of your beer? I was a little, and she would say yes, because back then things were different.
I remember that. Yeah, you take
it was the 70s. Here, have a sip, right? And well, one day we're at a barbecue, and I guess she had a few, and she wasn't paying attention to me, and she had just opened a beer. Mom, can I have a sip? And she just handed it to me and forgot about it. Well, I drank it, you know? So that was the first time I ever got a buzz. But forget about that. When I was, I'd say 10, 11, I started hanging out with my brother and his friends. They were a little older, and they used to smoke cigarettes. So I started smoking cigarettes. Then they used to drink beer, whiskey, whatever. And, you know, I just try a little to kind of fit in, but eventually I was drinking with them. And, yeah, so it started real young. And then I would say by 12, I was smoking weed. By 16, I had done LSD, mescaline, PCP, cocaine. I didn't get to heroin until I was 20 something. And it just escalated. And what sucks is that we knew as children, I mean, there was a saying that we had, stick to the naturals, you know, and we always said that, you know, but then when the naturals got boring and we started doing other things, we just kind of forgot it, you know. And I went on when I was in junior high, my friend came to me and he said, my brother is a speed dealer and I have all these pills. Let's try them. and we would try different pills, right? And one would just make us pee a lot, and one would make us feel good, and we didn't know what was what.
It was just anything.
It was, well, it turned out he didn't have a brother at all. He was lying, and his mother had lupus, and he was just stealing her medication, throw it in a bag and bringing it to school, right? So this one girl brought in what was called the physician's desk records. It was before Google, and you look up the pill and you can see a picture of it and see what it did. And we found that the one that we liked was it was Tylenol 3 with codeine. And so Emperor is what it was called. And yeah, we just started taking those. So we're talking 14 years old. I was already popping pills, right? Like I said, by 16, all the psychedelics and PCP. Turned to about 20 years old, around my 20th year. A friend of mine, well, when we used to smoke PCP, we put a little crack on top and call it space base. And it would change the PCP experience. It would make it more intense. And then one day, a friend of mine said to me, why don't you just try the crack without the dust, without the PCP? And I said, no, I heard it's instantly addictive. And he said, no, it's not, dude. I've been doing it for a long time. You're going to love it, right? And so I tried it, and I shit you not, I was too young to understand my own thoughts. I have to say that, because I was simultaneously saying, this stuff is not addictive at all. Can I borrow $20 to get some more? So, I mean, yeah. So instantly addictive, hell yeah. Obviously, if I was wanting to borrow money to get more, it was instantly addictive. So for about a decade, I would smoke PCP and crack religiously. Like,
Talking like daily?
huh?
Like you were doing it daily, or like?
So PCP and crack were a weekend thing at first, and then eventually crack just became, the PCP just went out the window. It was like, we can't get that today. Let's just get some crack. Yeah. And I was smoking crack. I had done blow and stuff like that too. That's a whole different story, but it wasn't as crazy. But once I started smoking crack, it was every day. It was for a decade. I sold everything I had, like I would be doing good, and I'd have a good job and an apartment. And then I'd buy I bought a VCR back in the day, $400 VCR. And I came home, and the girl I was living with said, bad news is I sold the VCR. Good news is I got a gram. And I wasn't mad. I was a little pissed off, but the reward outweighed that. And so I was like, okay, let's go, and it wasn't until I was 30 years old that I had such a crew of people coming in and out of the house. We had a lot of friends, and most of them had addiction problems. And so it would be a Tuesday afternoon, and people would be knocking on my door. Hey, you want to get high? And so it became impossible to not get high. Like, it was just always there, always in my face, always, hello, Bill, here it is. It's free. Have some. And when it wasn't free, I would just spend everything I had until I didn't have anything left, lost apartments, all sorts of shit. And
what's a crack session like? Like, as far as like,
oh, it's ridiculous. The first time you do it, when you hit it, hold on, there's a beeping. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I didn't want that to ring your recording. So the first time you smoke crack, it's pure euphoria. Like, you can't explain it. The rush is insane. It's better than any cocaine you've ever done. It's amazing. But that's once. And then after that, you'll never quite feel that again. And you just spend your life chasing it. And what comes after that is extreme paranoia, to the point where if you ever look at windows and you see blinds, and you see that some of the blinds are cracked right around eye level, that's where crackhead is.
Is it peeking?
Yeah, they're looking outside to see if the cops are coming, and they eventually break the blinds in that spot, you know? And then it gets worse if you shoot up. I lived with this guy, we called him Cowboy, and he would stick the needle in his arm, and as he was pushing the plunger, he'd be reaching for the blinds to look outside. Like, the paranoia is so intense.
And it's like an instant paranoia.
Well, with crack, it takes about 30 seconds to kick in. When you're shooting, this guy was instant. And yeah, it's extreme paranoia to the point where you definitely hear that the cops are outside. You can hear the walkie-talkies, you know they're there, and it makes no sense because you can't see them. They're not there.
So it's like an auditory hallucination.
Auditory hallucinations and you know, like kind of a psychosis, because you're positive, even though there's nothing there. You're positive that something's there. You just can't see it. It's hiding. You know what I mean?
And then what's the time frame like? Like if someone comes over on a Tuesday afternoon with some crack, it's like, is it you smoke till you run out of money type stuff?
Yeah. So crack doesn't last very long. So you say you bought one vial of crack. At the time, it was like $5. You threw it in your pipe. That's one hit, right? Mm-hmm. And you would smoke it. You'd get 10 seconds of quick euphoria, instant paranoia right after that. And then you would spend the next hour or two or more just wanting more. People would be looking on the ground to see if they dropped something. The carpet mining, we used to call it, because if there was a carpet, they would be down on that carpet looking between every nook and cranny and pulling up things that looked potential, like anything white. If there was a piece of styrofoam on your carpet, someone was going to throw that in their pipe and try to hit it.
Damn.
You know? Oh, it's fucked up. It is the most fucked up addiction there ever is. And it's, I would say, nearly impossible to quit under normal circumstances. And
so it's one of those things where it's like, you do it and then you get like a couple days where you're like, all right, I'm done with that. And then it just like benders out again where you're like,
I don't know that I ever had a couple of days, unless nobody came over and I was dead broke, you know? And even then, I would probably scam and try to find a way, steal something, sell something.
Yeah.
You know, I had a buddy of mine that would just go out the door and come back with a car stereo, you know? And yeah, you know, it was bad. It was,
yeah, a friend who was addicted to it. And he said when he would run out of crack, he would turn into like Sonic the Hedgehog, and all he saw were coins everywhere. So
yeah.
If he saw a refrigerator, that just looked like $25 to him. If he saw, he said it was just constant.
And you could assess it instantly. Like, I had a buddy that would just go, well, that's worth 40, that's worth 20. I can get 10 for that on the street. And no matter what you had, and it would be ridiculous shit, but there's always someone going to buy something. And then it graduated to a point where, okay, so you look a little like Woody Harrelson, by the way. There was, in the 90s, Home Depot originally had a no receipt, no problem cash return policy.
Yeah.
And so my friends knew what was the most expensive thing in the store that you could steal that was small, right? And what it turned out to be is thermostats, you know, digital thermostats, things like that. And they had a plan too, where if you never left the store, you're really stealing. So they would just take something off the shelf that was expensive and walk over to customer service and put it down on the desk and say, I'd like to return this. And Home Depot would just hand them cash. And then eventually Home Depot said, no more of that. We're going to give you gift cards, right? So then all we had to do was call the dealer and say, hey, I got a $200 gift card for you for Home Depot. You want it? Yep. And so it was a never-ending, no money, no problem kind of situation, to where I'd say I probably smoked $300 worth a day worth of $300 a day worth of crack without having a job.
Damn.
And yeah, imagine what I could have done if I just didn't get high.
Yeah, if you were just doing anything else.
Right. And so, yeah, so it got to a point where there was one day and I was laying in my bed and I was paranoid and my heart was beating out of my chest. And I'm 6 foot tall. I was sitting on a 120-pound frame and you could see my heartbeat. It was bad. I looked like shit. I felt like shit. I was scared to die constantly. And one day I said, I just got to get out of this. And so I I was talking online to this girl that I hadn't seen in 13 years. And she said, why don't you come check out Venice, California? And I said, okay, sounds good, And she intended me to visit, but I mean, I was looking for a way out. So I jumped on a plane and I went there. When she found out that I had bought a one-way ticket, she got a little pissed. The first day we went out, we went to a bar and I went in the bathroom and this guy cut a line of cocaine on the toilet and I did it. And he goes, hey, I got some crack if you guys want to come back to my place. And I was like, I've been here one day. And the one thing I was trying to get away from is right there. Boom, first day one, and I really felt kind of hopeless, But
So crack anymore.
yeah, oh yeah, crack right there. Boom, first day. And so it was hit and miss. I wasn't doing it as often, but I still was getting high and it was still not good. And then one day, this is in my book, I was walking and I went to a bar on Venice Beach and I had a drink. And then that bar closes at sunset. So I was walking all the way down to the other end of the beach to go to this other bar, Hernano, that was stayed open till 1. And as I was walking, there was this group of 20-somethings on the beach, same age as me at the time, well, a little younger. And they were spinning fire. It's called poi. And they had a bonfire and they were spinning chains with fire on it. And I walked out to see what was going on. And this girl came up to me and she said, here, have some tea. And I didn't think anything of it. And I drank the tea and we're talking. And then I noticed the trails on the fire getting longer and longer. And I said, I knew, but I said, what was in that tea? And she goes, come on, mushrooms, silly. You know that. And I sat there and I didn't want to get high. I just wanted to watch the trails and hang out and have a good time. And it was the first time I thought about it where I was like, I really just don't want to do that. Why am I doing that? I didn't want to drink. I didn't want to smoke crack. I didn't want to do anything but just hang out with them and enjoy that little world, And that's when I realized for the first time that was the key,
That was the key to break you out of the routine of
Exactly. Yeah. So then I didn't quit that day. I got to admit that. I didn't quit that day, but I went back to my hotel room because I was living in a motel at the time. And I laid on the bed, I looked up at the ceiling and there was this big stain on the ceiling and it was gross and the place was gross. And I just had to leave again. I went back to the beach and by then the people were already gone, but the ocean was there. And I just thought, I can't live like this anymore. I can't. It's done. I have to stop. And shortly after that, I did. I stopped smoking crack. I was still drinking for a little while because I didn't think that was a problem yet. And you'll never quit anything if you don't think you should.
Yeah.
So there was a little while in between when I was drinking.
How did you get how did you get the whole ball rolling on like when I read your book, I heard all that story, but like most people would have eaten mushrooms and they've been like, oh, I don't smoke crack anymore. I've kind of found my way out of it. But what brought you to like write that whole That book was very detailed, very like,
Well, I thought about it for a long time. I mean, that happened to me in 2003, 2002 or 2003. And I wrote that book 20 years later, you know? So I had a lot of time to process not only what happened, but experiment and, other things. Like I said, I didn't stop drinking. I met my baby's mother. She was my drinking buddy. And then when the baby was born, it was time to stop drinking. And I couldn't. I was still stuck in that loop. And I wasn't paying attention to how I quit anything else. So drinking felt like a different animal to me. And then my baby's mother, well, she quit because she was pregnant. And then after she wasn't pregnant anymore, when she had cravings, she would just smoke a little pot. And that was it. And yet here I am out in the garage, drinking a 6-pack, and she's like, what are you doing? So I eventually caught on to what she was doing. And the thing about marijuana, there's several studies that show it. Some people get addicted to marijuana. So that's a touchy subject, but it's only about 10%. But when it comes down to it, there's studies out there that show that people that have an alcohol problem or even a cocaine problem or an opiate problem, if they smoke marijuana before they tend to either not use or use less. So an alcoholic that smokes some cannabis decides either not to drink or might have a beer, as opposed to what they were going to do, which was 12-pack, it kind of just changes your desire and changes your mindset. And so that worked for me, just like it worked for her. And then, but I still, Thursday would roll around. So we used to drink Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. That was after the kid was born. That was okay. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, for some reason, that was okay. And so when Thursday would roll around, I would start thinking, or I would stop at the liquor store, before I ever smoked pot or took an edible or anything like that. And so it would just kind of become a cycle again. And then one day, we had gone to a party and this group had a piñata, and in the piñata was acid, mushrooms, things like that. I wasn't ready to trip when we went to that party. And so I put him in a safe. Well, we forgot about him for like 4 years. I shit you not. And we're drinking one night. It was like a Friday or a Saturday. And at like 2 a.m, she goes, why don't we take that acid? And so I opened the safe and she's like, it's not going to work. Well, I took it. She took it. It worked. Believe me. And again, same thing. I was like, why am I in this cycle? What am I doing here? Why am I in this cycle? I don't like it. It's not fun anymore. I don't know why I'm doing it other than habit, other than just following the cycle. It's Thursday. It's time to drink. It's Friday. It's time to drink. Right. And that got so stuck in my head again with the acid, LSD. And I just stopped drinking. There was a time in between when I used other things to stop drinking. That's a whole other story. But the LSD broke the cycle. And so then I started telling other people about it. I told her because she was right there, and I told other friends that I saw that were having an issue with this or that. And people started trying it and, using it with the intent to quit. And it was working. And it started working for not just me and not just her, but other people. And the more people I told, the more people came back to me and said, you know what? I never thought I could stop. And now I don't even want to do it. Whether it was alcohol or opiates, cocaine. It just always came back with the same story, you know?
So
And then
were you telling them like, set aside a day, take a couple hits of acid and see what happens? Or was it more like take a hit of acid for like every 2 weeks for a couple months? Like, did you have a protocol for them, or was it just like try?
no, there was definitely a protocol. So what it was you have to start with intent. Okay. So before you take it, you have to know why you're going into it. Okay. I have the desire to quit this behavior, whatever that behavior is. And it even works with some mental conditions. And so you go into it with an intention, and then you take it with that intent in mind, you know. At first, you know, I thought once was plenty, you know, and it kind of worked. But then I would realize that over time, the longer it had been, those feelings would start to fade. And so I started reading the research. And what the research says, and it turns out to work right, is that the effects last for up to a month. And well, actually up to a year, but minimum a month, right? So what I would do is I started growing mushrooms. And at first, every 2 weeks or so, and then I tapered it off to maybe once a month. And now it's like quarterly. I would just take them with the intent to be off drugs and alcohol. And it works, you know?
So you would take them like, and what were you eating like mushroom wise? Like a high dose or like a couple grams or?
So yeah, I wouldn't call it a high dose. For me, some people need a higher dose, but for me, an eighth, like 3.5 grams, you know, is what I started with. Eventually I was just taking like 2 grams or whatever. The importance is that one, microdosing, it's the effects are limited. So you have to actually feel the dose. You know what I mean? You have to get into that mindset, that mushroom or LSD or mescaline mindset. But the importance is that you take it with the pure intent of doing what you want to do. You have it because, okay, so people were like, well, I've taken acid and I'm still an alcoholic. Yeah, but you took acid to go have a party.
Yeah.
You know? And that's cool too. Whatever turns you on is whatever, you know. But when you take it and you're actually thinking about what you want to accomplish, it changes your mind. You know?
Agree 100%. See, I have the kind of a thing where I do it, I shoot for once a month because I'm trying to like really map all this out. But like, not even in sobriety, but I have what I would consider like my best mind, right? Where it's like how I am as a husband, how I am with my kids, how I am with my workflow, how I am with my projects and starts and finishes and all that.
Mm-hmm.
After I have like a profound psychedelic experience, for 2 weeks, I'm bulletproof.
Oh yeah.
I'm like not eating any garbage, waking up on time, doing everything great with the kids, everything's organized. And then I slowly start to watch myself. I've got like, it seems like a petty habit, but I have a bad habit of like, if I take a hammer out, that hammer will die out by the thing that I nailed.
Yeah.
It's like,
I get you.
and leave them out. And I'll look at the sky, I'll look at the screws and be like, it's going to rain, but I'm going to leave you right there. Like I watch myself be like, or like a more simple example is like, I'll watch myself put my keys somewhere and in my head, I'll be like, that's a horrible place to put your keys. They're on top of this where you're never going to find. And I like fade away as I'm having that thought.
Yes.
But it's just a life of disorganization.
Yes.
Rainginess that like with the psychedelics, I'm able to like wake up, assess my day, and like everything moves away. Sure.
Yes.
So it's no, I mean, different technically, but it's the same as like a drug and alcohol problem where it's like, I know drinking the 6-pack is going to throw me off for the next 3 days, but fuck it. It's Thursday night.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I use it kind of that, but like, I wanted to talk to you because like, I know a lot of people who like, some of them can't get it through their head like when I tell them like, oh, I love to research psychedelics and take different doses. That way I can like go back to people and tell them like, you know, here's what this does, here's what that does. And like, they're like, yeah, but you're just taking drugs. But I'm like, but I'm not.
No, and you're not. And so I mean, technically everything's a drug, right? And they wake up in the morning and they reach for the speed.
Yeah.
Right? Get that coffee in real quick, you know, and then half of them are shoving down nicotine on top of that, right? And those are drugs. Everything's a drug, you know. Anything that isn't food is a drug.
Yeah.
So yeah, are you doing drugs? Sure, why not? But at the same time, there are harmful drugs and there are beneficial drugs.
Yeah.
Okay. I would put caffeine somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah. I love hate with it. I constantly get rid of it because I get these headaches.
Well, see, and it's highly addictive. If someone drinks caffeine every day and then they don't get it today, they're going to get a headache. They're going to be agitated. It's another drug, right?
And for me, so I quit coffee for the millionth time, maybe like 6 months ago. But like,
how's that going?
Stub my toe. One of my first thoughts is like, you should get a cup of coffee. Always pops up the weirdest shit. Like I'll be like, you should just fucking get a cup of coffee. Or like I'll take a piss at a gas station and I'll be like,
they got coffee.
They're like, I'm drinking that shit.
Okay. So on a much limited version, you've experienced addiction.
Yes.
And so you do understand it. Now, imagine that thing that you see that you want, you have to have it. And on top of that, you know that it's going to fuck up your life.
Yeah, I can grasp it. It's just like, so
that's
genie that gets it. And I know other, like some of my best friends growing up went down.
Oh yeah. So I have a graveyard tattooed on my back. It's a cemetery. I have a cemetery tattooed on my back.
Friends that died?
Yep.
Dang.
That's how many. And we're talking dozens. You know, and the first one I was 26 years old. Well, he was 26. I was actually 22. So he was 26. And since then, I mean, I can't even give you a number. I just know it's probably around 50. You know, my back is full of names and dates, you know, and most of them are opiate related. But some of them are, I mean, it could be anything: accidental drowning due to smoking angel dust and going for a swim, you know, suicide. Well, there's all sorts of stuff, but it's all drug related, all of it, every bit of it, you know. And yeah, it's
the other cool thing in your book, like, I'll let you explain it better, but like, let's say you are struggling with drugs and alcohol. I know you get into this in the book, and I would recommend anyone just buy the book. What do you think's because I have people say to me sometimes like, hey, I want to try mushrooms, but I had a pill problem and I've been sober for 10 years. And I don't want to be the guy that's like, don't do it, but I would gladly be like, read this book.
Well, here's the difference. And here's the thing. I've had people argue with me on places like Reddit or even on personally, like, you know, but what it comes down to is it's a completely different animal. It's not the same thing. If someone was struggling with, say, opioid addiction, I wouldn't recommend they drink a beer.
Yeah.
Because beer lowers your inhibitions, and then immediately you want to get high, right? Alcohol is right there with the rest of the drugs. I wouldn't recommend they do anything like that. But mushrooms, mescaline, LSD have zero potential for addiction and zero potential for overdose. So now you're taking something that's non-addictive and you're not going to die, right? Okay, it changes your reality. So that's the only reason that they're associated with drugs, with other drugs, is that they change your reality. But they change your reality in such a different way, right? Cocaine makes you hyper. Opiates make you mellow. They give you a feeling of euphoria, things like that. Whereas, you know, LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, they take you to a different planet.
Yeah.
They take you to a different world. You know what I mean? They show you things about nature that you overlooked every day of your life growing up in this society. You know, you might have walked by that tree 1,000 times and not even looked up. And now you ate a few mushrooms and now you're staring at that tree for 20 minutes, just looking at the shapes and fractal patterns and the different things about that tree that are beautiful and unique. That's not the same as drugs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
I have never had anyone say, "Oh, I took some mushrooms and then I relapsed."
yeah.
That's not what's going to happen.
Like I've never had anyone, like I've got scores of people that'll be like, like they're embarrassed to talk about how much cocaine they used to do.
Yeah.
But I've never met someone that was like, I wish I didn't eat so many mushrooms in my mid-30s.
Okay, so let's just go with that. The war on drugs. Okay, let's call it the war on drugs. Yay. Reagan had a great fucking slogan. Yay. Or Nixon. Reagan pushed it. Just say no. And what are we saying no to? And that's the problem. No one's educated, right? What it comes down to is you've never heard of a DEA raid on a mushroom shop, right? You have never heard of someone knocking over a liquor store for acid.
Yeah.
The reason you've never heard of it is because it doesn't exist, right? They were lumped in and thrown in with everything else, all the stuff that would make you do that, like heroin, like fentanyl now, which is completely deadly, and the scientists just keep working on it. They've got something called carfentanil that you can die from smelling it.
Well, I'm actually in where my brother's house is on the Coriolis. This is like the epicenter of the United States of the opioid.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, it's
where are you at?
I'm in Kensington.
Okay. Have you ever been to New York?
Yeah, New York City.
Have you ever been to Rockland County, New York?
I don't think so.
Okay, so if you're in New York City, they call it upstate. But if you're in Rockland County, you can see the city. Okay. It's on the Jersey side. It's across the Hudson, but it's as close as you can get to New York City and be in New York without being in New York City. And that's where I grew up.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, there's a spot in Spring Valley called The Hill. And that's all you had to say to anyone that grew up there, The Hill. And they were immediately either scared or wanting to go up there and get some drugs.
Yeah.
Because that was the area. And the crack epidemic in that area started there and spread outward, And it started, we used to go to New York City for everything we wanted, really. That was just the local easy way. But yeah, it's still bad. It's still really bad. In fact, it's probably worse.
So I don't imagine. Around here, it's like everyone's nodding out. It's bad. It's like, what you're saying? So when they lumped all that in together with the fentanyls and everything, like, that's just how that became associated with it. And that's like, so like, what do you see?
Yeah. So that's the whole problem with people's mindset about drugs is there's zero drug education. And then we have that Nixon fuck up called the Controlled Substance Act. Now, understand, LSD, mushrooms, and mescaline are all number one. They are the most dangerous, most highly addictive drugs according to that schedule, which is completely not true. But go down the list to number 5 and you get Xanax. How many people do you know addicted to Xanax? Because I know a ton.
They don't tell everyone. Like
it's ridiculous how many people have anxiety 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Minimum, and yeah. So the drug scheduling system is so broken that it needs to be fixed. They're already legalizing cannabis in many states and thinking about doing it on a federal level. And the best they've come up with so far is the DEA is thinking about dropping it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2.
Yeah.
which is the same as Schedule 1, by the way. The difference is Schedule 2, there might be a medical use. It's still the most dangerous, highly addictive drug on the planet.
Too, like cocaine.
Yeah, cocaine is on there because it was used as, it was used for a lot of things in medicine in its early days. Cocaine, heroin is Schedule 2. Most of the opiates are Schedule 2. Anything you can think. Crystal meth is a Schedule 2. Tell me what the medical use for crystal meth is.
Cookies.
Can you figure it out? Maybe ADHD? I don't know. But it's on there. It's Schedule 2, which means there's an accepted medical use for crystal meth. Yeah. But, mushrooms, no. Definitely. So, yeah.
People are trying to get sober. You recommend they do, like, set up a protocol for themselves and say, hey, maybe try mushrooms every other weekend for a couple months? Or like...
So my book completely outlines
you get
exactly what to do. But I don't like to say this is how you do it, because basically every person is an individual and every person is going to react differently. And everybody has to have a plan in their mind that works for them. You know what I mean? Some people can't ever use the cannabis remediation therapy, because some people are addicted to cannabis. So that's out the window for those people, What I suggest people do is find whichever remediation therapy works for them, the cannabis remediation therapy, the psychedelic remediation therapy, or the meditation remediation therapy, whatever works for them to immediately stop. The remediation therapy is an immediate, let me not do this anymore. And it has to be done almost constantly whenever there's a craving, right? So if you're using the cannabis, every time you get a craving, you might take an edible. If you're using the mushroom remediation, the psychedelic remediation therapy, maybe you'll take mushrooms every time you get a craving. If you're doing the meditative one, you have to meditate every time you get a craving. Whatever works for you at that stage is fine. But the second stage, that's where the long-term goal comes in. And that works best as a psychedelic experience therapy, right? Where you take a healthy dose, a dose that you're going to feel, and you sit and you reflect. And you don't have to spend the entire time doing it, but you go into it with the intent of not doing whatever behavior you're trying to change, right? After that, you only need to do that. Well, most people only need to do that at first once a month, and like you, and then eventually, like me, maybe once a quarter or once every 6 months. Some people stop altogether, and that's a personal decision on where you are, where you are with your addiction, And
then what do you think about, like, I know you touched on in your book, though, about people that, like, they need something, right? So, like, because that's, like, another big part of, like, when people think of California sober, they think, like, well, I'll go to the party and smoke a joint. And then, like, where do you think that ties into the concept of, like, replacing, getting blackout drunk and then going and buying a bag with, like, I'm going to get stoned at this party and still kind of party a little bit, but then go home?
So, I mean, that's an individual decision as well, but I don't think that you can sustain that. So if your intention every time you go to a party is that you have to be on another planet, that's not a good thing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Now, if you take an edible before a party to kind of get in the mood and feel socially comfortable, okay. You know what I mean? People take different medications for different things all the time, but I mean, if you're just trying to get obliterated, then you're still in the mindset, that you need to get obliterated all the time when you're around people, or just every Friday or just every day. And that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
You know?
Funny, that's what a lot of people think California sober means.
Yeah. And so that's a big problem because, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, California sober, doesn't that mean you just replace everything with weed? And I'm like, no, it's not what it means. If you're not trying to better yourself, then you're not working the program at all. You know, like I said, if weed or mushrooms or LSD were the cure, there would be very little alcohol. It's because most alcoholics have tried it, right? It's not about just taking another thing in place. It's about wanting to change your mind, wanting to change who you are. About, you know, it's about wanting to at least change your addiction, or for some people, your anxiety, your PTSD, you know, it helps with so many different things. And the studies are all cited in the book, but you can just Google, you know, psychedelic studies, and you'll come up with so many amazing studies that'll show you that I don't like to use the word cure, but it's definitely very beneficial to a lot of people for a lot of reasons.
I feel for me, it kind of got me out of like, this could have been getting older too, but like that drive of when you go, so like the reason I used to drink so much when I was younger is like, I didn't know who I was or what I was or what to do. So it was like, if I went somewhere, I had to get fucking hammered or else I was like, I felt weird.
Plus it made you think of things to say and act a little crazy. Is that?
It gave you like a reason to be at a party. You know, it's like, if I could get drunk, then these are all my friends. You know, it was like a weird mindset.
I'm not sitting in the corner just staring. Yeah.
I'm not just being weird. And then I think what happened to me was like, I started drinking around like 14, 15. And then suddenly like you're going to a party and like acting funny and everyone thinks you're cool. And at that young of an age, you just get stuck in that mode of like,
oh yeah,
this is how I meet people. This is who I am. This is why people like me, because I'll drink with them.
And that's a big thing. A lot of people, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And that was me through my teens and 20s. You know, this is who I am. This is exactly who I want to be, because it brought out a version of me that I thought was cool. You know, a version of me that I look back on and say, all right, maybe it wasn't that cool, you know, but I mean, he did a lot of dumb shit, but alcohol is a tool. It has its position to take away anxiety and things like that. Right. But it's not used that way and it's highly addictive. So it's probably not a great idea for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people
have an end in my book.
Yeah. Some people don't have a problem drinking.
Yeah.
I used to hang out with guys that would go to the bar and they'd be sipping a beer for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, what are you doing? Drink.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, no, I'm good. You know, those people don't need help.
Yeah.
You know, but then there's the people that are two-fisted, you know, and trying to hurry up and finish this one so I can get to this one.
Yeah.
That was me.
That was how I was when I was younger. And it was just more and more.
Uh-huh.
It was funny. I never actually quit drinking. I think I just like outgrew it.
Okay. And that happens. That happens with a lot of addictions. And that's in the book too.
Yeah.
There's studies that say, you know, coke addiction lasts about a decade.
Or it was in your book. You said like, if you're over a certain age, the chance of getting addicted is like super, I forget what the math.
Yeah. So, okay. So anyone under 18, you're going to be addicted if you start farting. It's almost that simple, you know, 18 to 25, high chance. But after that, after your mid 20s, when you're in your late 20s or whatever, most people, and I don't like to say nobody, most people, I know a guy that got addicted to crack in his 50s. So I'm not going to say this is true for everyone, but the studies show that most people in their 30s or 40s that start drinking then don't have a problem, you know, because they've built an entire existence without it.
Yeah.
You know, whereas when you start when you're 11 or 5, right, Um, it, like you can't see yourself without it. You're like, well, who am I without a beer?
It's
Who am I without Jack Daniels? Can I take a 2-second break?
yeah, go for it.
Let me break it down for you. So the remediation therapies are for anyone who is struggling but wants to quit, right? Either cannabis or one of the psychedelics, or even meditation, if that works. It works a little less. It's a little harder to do, but whatever works to stop you immediately from using.
You're saying like craving with.
Exactly. Just ends the craving. And for me, that was cannabis, but I've also done it with psilocybin. I never personally used acid, but I know people that have. I mean, I've used acid, but I never used it for cravings. I know people that have. Immediately after that, you have to do, or you should do, a psychedelic experience therapy where you really reflect on your problem. After that, it's maintenance. It's taking an inventory of yourself. It's figuring out who you are and what you want, and doing that kind of on a daily basis. Eventually it becomes second nature, and then you get to a point where I can sit at a bar and people could be cutting lines on the counter.
Yeah.
And I'd have zero desire to follow their lead. There's no fucking part of me that ever wants to feel that way again.
It's like, and that's so cool about it, because it's like a lot of like the AA, NA stuff just hammers on like, you're an alcoholic forever.
Yeah.
You're a heroin addict forever. And I had a good friend, and he used psychedelics he got clean through that route, through like the AA, NA rehab route.
Mm-hmm.
He used psychedelics to like put the nail in the coffin and then get rid of like the addiction of
meetings. Yeah. So there are plenty of people that come to me, and a lot. I mean, we're talking at least weekly, if not daily, where they're like, listen, I was struggling with AA or NA, and I just, all I could do when I go to those meetings is think about getting high. And then I tried your way, and now I don't even think about it. There's plenty of people that come to me and say, hey, listen, I was in AA and my sponsor told me that I should go to rehab because I use medical marijuana for back pain. And so what do I do? And I told him, I said, use medical marijuana for back pain. But that's what you do. Fuck your sponsor, excuse my language. They're wrong in your case. You know what I mean? And, I've even had people come to me and say, I feel guilty that I love to use psychedelics and that they help me with my recovery, because when I go to meetings, everyone looks at me like a drug addict. And I tell them, you're not snorting fentanyl anymore. It's not a good thing. I mean, everyone's recovery is different. Everyone is individual, and your recovery should be as individual as you are. It's the 21st century, and people are still arguing over a book that was written 85 years ago. That, it might have worked 85 years ago. Studies show it didn't, about 10%, but whatever. Even if we don't argue that, the author of the book took LSD from 1957 on.
Yeah.
So if you want to say, I'm a big Bill W. guy. Okay. Bill W. was a big LSD guy. In case you didn't know, he talked to his wife, his secretary, Nell, and his pastor all into doing it with him.
Yeah.
And they all had ceremonies together. Betty Eisner, one of the leading psychedelic researchers, she's the one who gave it to him.
Yeah.
She wrote a book called, what was it? Memories of Psychedelic Therapy Past, I believe. Anyway, it's in there.
Yeah, because I just read another book by a guy named Myron Stolarov.
Okay.
And he was a friend of like Al Hubbard, Bill W., like that whole circle of like pre-Timothy Leary psychedelic.
Huxley.
Yeah, Huxley got it from Al Hubbard. There's another guy, his name's escaping him. Humphrey Osmond.
Okay, so Humphrey Osmond and Bill W. were pals. Right?
Yeah.
And he's who told Bill, hey, come out to California. We got something you need to try.
Yeah.
You know. And so yeah. And like I said, whenever someone in AA says, oh, that's not sober, I'm like, well, you founder, the guy who wrote the 12 steps, thought it was and wanted it to be part of AA. What? The board told him, sorry, the alcoholics think you're a drug addict. So, and he was judged just like the rest of us.
And it didn't fit the mode of what they were doing at the time meetings. It was like,
well, yeah, because people didn't understand psychedelics.
Yeah.
We're talking 1950s, you know. We're talking, and he started AA in 38, you know. So we're talking like before any of the hippies, before anyone was really on a big level doing any of these things, you know.
It was like Cary Grant was the only face of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
And then what are your thoughts on like so moving forward as we end the drug war, what do you think we should do as a society with more dangerous addictive drugs?
Okay. That is the toughest question on the planet Earth. There's different schools of thought. I would say that keeping things illegal doesn't help anyone. Unfortunately, it just feeds the cartels. And that if people had even limited access to drugs, they would die less. That's my thought on it. But at the very least, to quote Hamilton Morris, the war on vegetables is insane. No plant should ever be illegal.
I'd agree with you on that. I like, it's funny, I've got two kids now, 4 and 6. And I'm always like, how am I going to explain this to them? And like the way I look at it is like I think we should legalize drugs across the board. And then it's kind of like a let the chips fall where they may scenario, but at the same time, like
here's the thing, and here's why you're right. Okay. No drug addict has said, oh, fuck, it's illegal. I'm not going to do that. You know, no drug addict has said, I can't get drugs because they don't sell it at Rite Aid.
Yeah.
No, that's not what's happening. What's happening is you're getting ripped off and mugged in the streets. You know, you're overdosing on bullshit that was laced with fentanyl or carfentanil or something else. You know, that's the war on drugs. The casualties of the war on drugs are the innocent victims.
Yeah.
You know, the cartels and the government aren't really battling.
Oh, 100%.
The battle's in the street, you know?
Then the only thing I would add to that is I think like we should treat it kind of like drinking and driving. So it's like heroin's legal, cocaine's legal, all this is legal. If you're publicly intoxicated and a nuisance, it's a stiff penalty. You know, so if you're doing that, I think at the same time, if you take the edge out of them and you're like, oh, heroin, that's what you get if you go down to that clinic down there and everyone's just sitting there in fucking medical chairs getting their heroin, no one will do it.
Yeah.
I think half the heroin thing is like, especially kids my age that did it, it was like, oh, I smoke weed now, therefore I do drugs, therefore I hang out with the druggies.
Well, that was the problem with the Controlled Substance Act. You put number one is marijuana. Number one. So why can't I do it number two? Marijuana was fine. Why can't I do it number two?
Like that.
Marijuana is the worst there is.
Yep.
Then everything else must be better, right? Must be more healthy, must be less addictive, right? But no, that's not the case. And so the schedule of controlled substances tricked us, especially. Yeah, I'm 52. I was born in the 70s. I grew up in the 80s, and I was partying in the 90s. You know, And I thought, hey, they said this was the worst. I'll try the next, not so bad. And yeah, I was doing heroin and cocaine and eventually crack. Yay. You know?
And I think like a lot of people just got lumped into like the kids I knew that tried crack got it from dudes that were selling pot. That was like an underworld scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
My kids now, if they start smoking pot in 5-10 years, they're gonna go get it at
The dispensary.
that's right.
And there's no crack there. Yes, exactly.
The heroin.
Hey, do you know where the word heroin comes from?
Nah.
It was marketed by a very famous company called Bayer.
And what was it?
It was heroin.
Well, like what was it was like sold on the shelves or like
Diethyl morphine. So it's heroin, right? But the people who came up with the name heroin were Bayer. And it was sold on the shelves at the store. You could walk in, buy a vial of cocaine and a vial of heroin at the store.
I read that. Did you read Mike J's book, Psychonauts?
I did not read Psychonauts, but I really want to. I've read a lot about it.
It's wild.
Yeah.
But like people were buying cocaine and heroin at the drugstore.
Uh-huh.
Started selling needles too. And then you would go to the drugstore and be like, I can't stop shooting cocaine. Then they'd be like, oh, you should try heroin because lessen the cocaine withdrawal. So we would sell you heroin and then just like regular adventurous individuals would just shooting heroin, shoot coke.
And so that guy Cowboy I was telling you about way earlier that would peek the blinds as soon as he stuck the needle in his arm, he'd put both in the same syringe. And the weirdest effect would happen because he would go bing and he'd look out the window and then he'd start to nod out. It was the weirdest shit I ever saw in my life. I mean, I was in a lot of underworld places, you know, that being one of them. Crack houses, really bad places to get cocaine and crack in Washington Heights and New York City. You know, I mean, you would walk in the door after climbing 5 flights of stairs, you walk in the door and there'd be a guy sitting there in his tighty whities with a scale, a pound of cocaine, a pound of crack, and a gun. The reason he was in tighties whities so he didn't steal nothing. And the reason he had a gun was in case he had to shoot you in the face. And the first time he said to me, hey, you want a line? And I said, no, thank you. He patted the gun and he said, you want a line? And I said, oh yeah, definitely.
Just make sure you weren't a cop or something?
Exactly. That was the test. You're either going to do it or I'm going to shoot you in the fucking face.
Yeah.
You know?
Made it this far.
Huh?
It's like you've made it this far.
Yeah. You climb the stairs, you walk through the door, you're in the underworld. Take a line or a bullet. Yeah, it was definitely a different time. I don't know how different it is. I've just been out of the game long enough to hope it's different. You know?
To find someone who's still in the game to check in.
Yeah. Well, I could probably do that really easily just calling a few friends back east.
Yeah, like, hey, it's up.
Yeah. There's 1 or 2 that didn't come out.
And they're still in it, like lifers.
I got one friend, I won't mention his name, but last time he called me was the summer before this past summer from a shelter in New York City. And he said, when I get my disability check and I walk outside to go get maybe a bag of angel dust, the crack dealer and heroin dealer catch me before I get there and I spend all my money. He also, his mother just told me that he spends a lot of time in the hospital due to seizures and things like that due to drug addiction. Yeah. And so, yeah. I haven't heard from him in a year and a half. I know he's alive because I hit up his mother like a couple of weeks ago or a week ago to ask, because a friend of ours just passed away from an unrelated illness. And I wanted to get a message to him, you know? So yeah, there's people still in the game that will never get out. Oh, this guy's motto was live fast, die young. Unfortunately, the die young part didn't come for him. So he just live fast, grow old and decrepit. And it sucks. That does suck. Yeah.
What last thing I'll ask you, I help up the kids with it. You said you're working on another book now, right?
I'm working on several because I have like that ADD. Well, it's not real ADD, but I bounce around on stuff.
Yes.
So I don't know if you know, but I did write another book before that called For the Love of Opium. I don't, people take it weird when I say that and I'm talking about sobriety. But like we were talking about, the pharmaceutical companies have made heroin into carfentanil and beyond, fentanyl, carfentanil, and there's stuff that you can die from inhaling, from just smelling it, from just being near it. And I think, in my personal opinion, that had it just stayed with opium, there'd be far less addiction and definitely far less death. But since then, I'm working on a book called Godflesh, and that's about mushrooms and cacti. And there's actually a couple of tribes that called mushrooms Godflesh. But I think it's an awesome name because it's the flesh of the gods. You eat it and you are one with them, you know? And then there's a book I'm working on called The Gateway, which is all about cannabis, you know? And they're all part of a series called The Magic Garden.
Wow.
Yeah.
And once you get that cactus going, you got a book on cactus needs to be written too.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
I mean, cactus is I'd say that's like my lifelong passion.
I've grown some cactus, like I told you, some cacti. I've grown mushrooms. I've grown opium poppies. I've grown cannabis. I've grown salvia. I've grown, I don't know if it's kratom or kratom. I've heard it both ways.
I say kratom.
Yeah. So whatever. I have a passion for growing things that, affect the mind.
I'm with you on that. I grow salvia, mushroom, I grow cannabis.
That salvia is a pain in the ass.
It loves it. Right now around Philadelphia, it's like highs in the 70s, lows in the high 50s at night, and it's exploding. It's taking off.
Oh yeah.
So good. But it's
fickle. It's fickle and it loves the shade.
Yep. I have it grown under some big pine trees.
Yeah, you don't want to put that too close to the sun, definitely.
That lives in the shade, and then it comes in and lives next to my bed at night.
All right, that's awesome.
And then I'm growing, other than that, it's just those ones. And then my other lifelong goal is to learn psychedelic chemistry.
Yes, that's an awesome goal. And yeah, I would love to, but I don't think I'm going to chemistry school at 52.
I went back during the end of the pandemic for like Chem 101, and it was so hard that I was like, I'm going to pause this until my kids are like 12 and 13.
How old are you kids?
4 and 6.
Okay, you got a little time. So you'll be my age. That's great.
We decided to homeschool them, so I'm going to try to push chemistry on them. Yeah.
Like, they can just make it for you.
Well, so who knows? Yeah. All right, man, I'll let you go because I got to get home, put them to bed.
Definitely, man. Enjoy the kids, man.
Dude. And definitely stay in touch.
Oh, definitely, man. It was great talking to you.